It is May, and with that is now my favorite time of the year. The time of year when Road to UFC starts a new season. We've got the opening round coming up in just a few weeks on May 18th and 19th in Shanghai. Overall, there's going to be 40 fighters in competition between those 2 days. And over the next couple weeks, I want to take a look at as much of the tournament as I can, profiling as many of the fighters to see how this opening round may go. And up for today is the flyweight tournament. There's 8 fighters coming from several different countries: China, Korea, Japan, India, the Philippines, some of the most exciting prospects of the whole tournament. Flyweight is always a really deep tournament in Road to UFC, and this year's no different, with a couple really interesting entrants. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to create the most helpful primer that I can for the Road to UFC Flyweight tournament. I'm going to be profiling each fighter, giving you a brief summary of their game, what they're all about, their record, history, all of that. I'm going to give a seed for each fighter, so basically ranking them all 1 through 8. All that really means is how likely I think they are to win the whole tournament. Also kind of playing into their record, how good their competition they've already fought, all of that. None of that is to say that there won't be upsets. I expect that there will be, especially some of these matchups. Don't put too much stock into these seeds that I'm giving each fighter, because every single fighter in this tournament I think has the ability to finish their opponent. But if you have not done so already, why not subscribe to the MMA Ecosystem channel, like this video, and let's get started. All right, the first fight that I'm gonna take a look at is Tokki Matsui versus Ruel Panyales. Tokki Matsui is a 24-year-old out of Japan. He has a 6-1 record and trains at Paraista Kashiwa. He's mostly fought for the Pancrase organization, and for him, he was a little bit harder to find tape on just because all of his fights are pretty much behind a paywall. What I could find through little clips here and there is that he is a really well-rounded fighter and has exceptional boxing, especially for his age and record. This guy's got a heater of a right hand and has really good boxing. He's also got a really nice jab, pretty good timing on takedowns, and overall a really well-rounded fighter. He's got pretty good takedown defense and good at getting back up to his feet. Now, one thing you do have to realize about Tokki Matsui is that he is coming off of a loss. Now, that loss was against a really good undefeated Tajik fighter who basically ran the Central Asian Dagestani wrestling playbook against him and just wrestled him relentlessly over 3 rounds. There really wasn't a point where he was in a lot of danger. He was just put under a lot of pressure and just forced to wrestle constantly, always trying to get back up to his feet. And so he never really had the space to work his game a whole lot. I don't put too much stock into that loss, considering he fought pretty hard over the entirety of the 15 minutes. A loss is a loss, but I think that I don't know if there's anyone in this flyweight tournament that's going to be able to do exactly what his opponent did in Pancrase there. Other than that, though, the guy is a really, really solid prospect. The thing that I'm going to be watching for at Tokki Matsui is the weight. He was supposed to fight a few months ago in Pancrase and missed weight, and the fight got called off. So otherwise, if he would have fought, one, he would be coming off of a win. Otherwise, now he's coming off this loss. So that's the one thing I'll be watching for that. If his opponent can wrestle him really well, then that could be something there. But for the seed for Tokki Matsui, I'm giving him the number 2 spot in the flyweight tournament. I think he really is a well-rounded prospect that has a good chance of going all the way to the top of the tournament. Now, his opponent is one of 2 Filipino fighters in this tournament. Both of them are in this flyweight tournament. His opponent is 27-year-old Ruel Panyales. He fights out of D Incredible Team, which is coached by Rolando D, who is a former UFC fighter. He's never been to the judges' scorecards, and he really has a pretty good resume considering he's fought several times for Brave CF. Brave is a really good organization to fight for if you're not in one of the top leagues in the whole of the MMA ecosystem. And for the most part, you're gonna fight really tough fighters if you're fighting in Brave. He's also fought for UAE Warriors and only has 1 loss on his record. His only loss is to a guy named Misara Mohammed, who is an Egyptian guy that I think is maybe the top prospect out of each Egypt right now. Other than that, he has a 6-1 record. Now, he is kind of lacking that signature win in his career, but he also only has 6 fights to his credit. He last appeared in Brave against Mao Jianbing, a Chinese fighter who I think was pretty overmatched by Puñales. Puñales, his game is very explosive. He's a very athletic guy. He keeps a very high guard, fights out of southpaw, and has pretty good wrestling. Against Mao Jianbing, he kind of wrestled Mao up against the cage and basically got the stoppage by throwing punches from the back of Mao Jianbing. Got the first round TKO. So for Roel Puñales, I'm gonna give him a number 6 ranking just because I don't really know how he performs against top competition just yet. So it's kind of hard to gauge for him. I think that he's an explosive guy and he does have the power to really finish anybody in this tournament. I think he is a really solid fighter and a very worthy addition to this tournament. That being said, I think this is probably going to be a really explosive and entertaining fight. Both guys have really good power in their hands, so either guy winning probably wouldn't be that surprising to me. Puñales does like the head kick, and Matsui can keep a pretty low stance with his hands also kind of low, so you may want to watch for that. Otherwise, I think Matsui probably will be prepared for anything that Puñales can throw his way. He's got the much smoother, more powerful combinations. So I think Tokki Matsui wins this by KO in the first round. I think this fight's gonna be fast and furious. All right, next up, we've got Inu Yan out of China fighting Kiro Singh Sahota, who is from England. Inu Yan is he's a very interesting fighter. I'm really glad that he made this tournament. On paper, he's got one of the best records in this whole tournament. It's 16-4. He has fought a lot in China. He's fought for JCK several times, fought for Glory of Heroes, and a little bit for WLF. But in JCK, he has an 8-1 record, and he's a former winner of their whole tournament experience system where he won 1 million RMB. So he is a very good fighter. Overall, pretty well-rounded, but in some ways, a little bit still in development. Now, Inu Yan is 26 years old, and he's bounced around a lot between camps in his career. Overall, he's a really athletic guy, really explosive takedowns, throws, kind of single shot, high power strikes, head kicks, big overhand rights, chopping low kicks, has pretty good offensive wrestling, but a little bit suspect takedown defense, pretty crafty off his back as well. It's interesting because he's a guy that has a lot of raw ability. It looks like if he was shaped by the right people, he could really honestly become like a world champion level material. I think a lot of that depends on the consistency that he has in training, where his headspace is at. In his last fight, he fought a guy named Shamuhar Aidalibieka, who's a Chinese Kazakh, who was able to wrestle him almost like Tokki Matsui in his last fight. Same kind of situation with Inu Yan, where this guy Shamuhar wrestled him really hard over the course of 3 rounds, and it was still a pretty close fight in some ways, but Shamuhar just was able to get him down. But Inu Yan was able to pop back up several times, and the striking things were pretty close. So Inu Yan, I think he's a powerful, explosive guy, but just because there's some pretty big liabilities with his game, with his takedown defense, his striking can be kind of limited to single strikes. I'm gonna give him the 7 ranking, but again, he is an explosive guy, so you never know what you're gonna see in the flyweight tournament of Road to UFC. He's fighting a guy named Kiro Singh Sahota, who is 28 years old, fights out of Manchester Top Team, one of the top gyms out of England, holds a 10-2 record, pretty much has fought on the British regional scene. He did fight for Cage Warriors 2 fights ago against a really good prospect in Sean Da Silva, and had some good moments in that fight, but ultimately ended up losing by TKO. One thing about this guy is that he's got 20 amateur fights. So even that 10-2 record, I know amateur isn't the same level as pro, but it's still experience. Each one of those is a walk to the cage. It means he was training at least somewhat seriously that whole time. So between pro and amateur, he's got 32 fights. I think Kiro Singh Sahota is a really impressive fighter. He fights behind the jab, he feints a lot, pretty much the opposite kind of body type as Inu Yan. Inu Yan, kind of a shorter, really muscular guy. Kiro Singh Sahota, really tall, long, wiry. He's very technical. He flows together combinations, all built around the jab. A lot of big differences. And what I saw of his takedown defense was that it's pretty good. He's able to sprawl well against the cage, a hard guy to take down, gets back up if he is taken down. So this is a pretty big contrast of styles and physiques. Kyrosing Sahota, I'm gonna give him a number 4 ranking. His experience and his longevity overall in the game and the team that he comes from, I think he's got a lot of really good fundamentals. Both of the guys in this fight, I think a lot of good potential. Right now, from what I've seen, Sahota has just a little bit more seasoning and well-roundedness to his MMA game. He, I think, is probably going to be countering Inu Yan a lot through this fight. Inu Yan is going to be throwing one punch, and Kuro, he's going to be countering him. He's going to be leading the dance with combinations, so I think he can get pretty far ahead on the judges' scorecards just because of that. I don't think either guy's going to shoot for a takedown. If one guy would, maybe it would be Sahota trying to replicate the Shamuhar loss for Inu Yan. It's also been a long time since we've seen Inu Yan in action. Since we saw him last, he went and trained at Bong Tao MMA and Muay Thai in Phuket, Thailand. And then he's currently training at Black Tiger MMA, which is where Zhang Wei Li came from, JCK champion Wang Xiaoshang. A lot of really good coaches at that gym. So we could see a much more refined, polished Inu Yan who's able to use combination striking a little bit better. So this could be a really surprising fight. I would say Inu Yan, if he wants to win this fight, try to hit Kyrosing Sahota with that overhand right. Sometimes Sahota, his hands can come up and down, and I think Inu Yan could time that to land the overhand right. So you may look for that, but most likely I think Sing Sahota is going to get a decision win here. All right, now moving on to this fight between God Bish and John Almanza. This is such an interesting fight because two really different styles of fighters. Some elements of Almanza are pretty unknown to me, whereas God Bish has a little bit more tape, but is, again, a guy that you really see developing a lot. God Bish from India is 28 years old. He is 8-3, and he's the current MFN flyweight champion. His recent couple wins are against pretty good competition, so I think that's worth giving a lot of stock. This guy is the head coach at Mutant MMA in Uttarakhand, India. When we're talking about God Bish, we're talking about his grappling game. Maybe one of the best grapplers in the whole Road to UFC season this year. When this guy gets your back, it's pretty much game over. His last 3 wins, he's won by rear naked choke in every single one. On the feet, he's pretty one-dimensional, I will say, and not always super mobile, not always very busy, can sometimes kind of freeze up on the feet. On the feet, you may see him get tagged a few times, but as soon as the fight hits into the grappling space, it's going to be a whole different fight. So you'll want to watch for that. Overall, he's got pretty good conditioning. I think he kind of knows what his own limits are, and so on the feet, it seems like a lot of times he's just kind of looking to set up, get the setups to get the fight to the ground where he can work his magic on the mat. I'm gonna give God Bish a number 5 seed, and I went back and forth with that several times because he is an MFN flyweight champion. His grappling is amazing, but in this tournament, there's a lot of great strikers, and if he's not busier, if he doesn't know how to be a little more mobile, move his head, all that stuff, he could be at a big disadvantage against a lot of these guys, such as against John Almanza, who's a 30-year-old Filipino fighter, 6-0, trains out of Checkmate, Manila. This guy is one of the harder guys to scout in the season just because really up until his last fight, he hadn't really fought anyone, I would say, with any kind of notable record. The last guy he fought and beat was 5-0, but even that fight was really back and forth. I think, again, with Almanza, he has a lot of really good potential. He's pretty smooth on the feet, and his jiu-jitsu game is pretty solid too. So he has a lot of good skills. It's hard for me to say if he is really ready for this tournament or not because of the experience. I'm not really sure. Yeah, he's got really smooth hands, good combinations, moves his head well. He really likes front kicks, head kicks, all that good stuff. The downside is that sometimes he can keep his hands a little bit low, and he usually pays the price for that. Probably against God Bish, he's going to have a little bit of a size disadvantage, and sometimes not the best takedown defense. So because of that, I'm going to give John Almanza the number 8 seed, just because he's the most unknown, the most untested. Yeah, he's undefeated, but don't really know what to expect from him. Hard to really know where he fits into all of this. So this fight with God Bish, Gonna be a really interesting matchup between two pretty contrasting styles. I don't know how this will go on the feet. Bish doesn't typically lead the dance that much there, so I think it's all up to Almanza to kind of get into a flow state and accumulate the damage. Eventually though, I think on God Bish will have no issue getting Almanza to the ground. Almanza's grappling is good, but Bish pretty much on another level there, and I think we'll see him cut through John here and either get a decision, grappling heavily decision, or a rear naked choke submission. So that's my pick there, on God Bish by rear naked choke. All right, now moving on to potentially the toughest fight of this whole flyweight tournament for me to pick between two of the guys I'm most excited about in all the Road to UFC season. This is Cho Dong Hun out of South Korea against Inu Yan from China. What I saw when I watched Cho Dong Hun, he's got a really powerful left hook. He knocked down Noriyoshi Wada and KO'd Kento Kubo with that left hook. Fights out of the southpaw stance, uses leg kicks to bring down the hands, sets up heavy punching combinations, pretty good footwork. So on the feet, really powerful guy, really creative striker, even knocked out a guy with a crescent kick to the body. On the ground, like I said, pretty good in the clinch, but on the mat, not always able to land a lot of ground and pound or be super offensive. He is creative and likes to use trips to get things to the ground with his judo background. Overall, I'm gonna give Cho Dong Hun a number 3 seed because I think this guy definitely could go to the top. However, that leaves the number 1 seed for Inu Yan, a finalist from last season's flyweight tournament of Road to UFC. Personally, I thought the fight against Ray Tsuruya was stopped several beats too early, especially with 1 second left. I felt like Inu Yan still had a lot left in him, didn't seem horribly damaged. So glad that we get to see him right back in there. And I think there is a good chance we could see him go all the way to the finals again this year. He's 23 years old, 13-3 record, originally trains out of Umbo Fight in Chengdu, China. He is an ethnic minority, looking to be the first UFC fighter of that minority. Comes from a Sanda background and fights in the southpaw stance. Overall, he really impressed me in the last season of Road to UFC. Really calm guy. Good reactions, good composure, very measured and efficient. He's got a fast jab, really strong left hook, and really good at measuring distance. Always you see him just sliding out of the way, stepping just into range, piecing up his opponents, really good head movement. Sometimes leaves the chin up there a little bit too much for me, but also has really good takedown defense, good fast double leg. Once he gets things to the ground, huge ground and pound, especially for a flyweight. So this fight, honestly, between two of the best guys in the flyweight tournament. It's a shame that one of them has to get eliminated. Kind of hard for me to pick against Inu Yan after the incredible performance he had last year. Fight also has upset kind of written all over it with Choi's knockout power. Probably the better power does go to Choi on this on the feet. I think a lot of the fight unfolds in the clinch as Inu Yan tries to take down Choi to the mat, but maybe unsuccessfully there. Otherwise, I think there'll be a couple landed takedowns from Inu Yan, and the rest of the fight, Inu Yan probably working from range, getting a little bit more on the judges' scorecards. All of that could change if Choi just lands a couple really heavy punches, can land the more damaging shots in the fight. I think Inu Yan probably gets a decision, but Choi's power makes that decision a little bit shaky for me. I don't know. That's all the predictions I got for you today. Hope you enjoyed that breakdown of the Road to UFC flyweight tournament. Let me know your own thoughts on the tournament, who you think will win, if I got any of the seeds wrong. And until then, enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you next time for the next breakdown.